In politics, strategy often shifts, but rarely this abruptly. After spending millions to convince their voters that mailing in ballots is safe and even essential, Republican leaders now face a stunning about-face from the party's standard-bearer. Not long ago, the Republican National Committee was all in on early and absentee voting. By 2023, GOP strategists had watched Democrats rack up comfortable pre-election day margins for years and concluded they had to play the same game. The result was Bank Your Vote, a multi-million-dollar push to normalize mail and early voting among Republicans. Every state got its own website, materials appeared in 16 languages, and the pitch was simple. Lock in Republican votes early so nothing, work, weather, or a long line, could erase them on Election Day. Even former President Donald Trump, who had spent 2020 railing against mail ballots, recorded a video for the campaign. He asked supporters to commit to voting early, and his team rolled out a website called swampthevoteusa.com, promoting all voting methods, mail, early in person, and Election Day. All of that collapsed on Monday, August 18, 2025. Trump declared he would lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots and electronic voting machines before the 2026 midterms. He said the best lawyers in the country were drafting an executive order to ban both, labeling mail voting corrupt. The arguments behind this reversal haven't changed. Trump still claims, without evidence, that widespread fraud taints mail ballots, and even asserted the United States is the only country in the world that uses mail-in voting. In fact, dozens of democracies use postal voting, and domestic studies have repeatedly found fraud to be minimal. The legal problem is just as familiar. The Constitution gives states, not the White House, primary control over how elections are run. Congress can set nationwide rules, but a president can't override state laws with an executive order. Trump now claims states are merely an agent of the federal government and must fall in line, a theory that collides with decades of conservative arguments for states' rights and would almost certainly trigger immediate lawsuits from both blue and red states. Inside the GOP, the whiplash is intense. Party committees spent the past year telling loyal voters, relax, mail ballots are secure. Now, the party's most powerful voice calls the very same ballots illegitimate. Operatives who designed the Bank Your Vote program have to decide whether to defend their own work or echo Trump's new demand to scrap it. For voters, the message is even murkier. First, mail ballots were dangerous. Then, they were patriotic. Now, they're corrupt again. Confusion depresses turnout, and Republicans can't afford more self-inflicted losses in tight races. Beyond partisan math, critics warn the proposal strikes at basic access to the ballot box. Millions rely on absentee voting, deployed service members, citizens overseas, seniors, people with disabilities, parents juggling childcare. Scrapping mail ballots would make voting harder for each of them without solving a problem that evidence shows is vanishingly small. So where does this leave the party and the country heading into 2026? Republicans face a public split. Either they follow their data-driven plan to bank votes early, or they follow Trump's push to ban the method entirely. Both paths can't coexist. States are almost certain to fight any executive order that infringes on their election authority, setting up a court battle that could stretch well past Election Day. The broader electorate risks another cycle dominated by misinformation about how voting works, eroding trust in outcomes before ballots are even counted. A year ago, the GOP invested millions to reassure its own voters. Now its leader promises to pull the rug out from under that effort. Whether the party doubles down on its original strategy or rallies behind Trump's new crusade will shape not just Republican chances in 2026, but the rules under which all Americans cast their ballots.
In Washington, D.C., a growing military presence is hard to miss. On Monday, the Republican governors of Mississippi, Tennessee, and Louisiana ordered their National Guard units to the Capitol, joining earlier commitments from West Virginia, South Carolina, and Ohio. All told, 6 states are now sending more than 1,100 extra troops to patrol the city, on top of roughly 800 D.C. Guard members President Trump activated 10 days ago. The weekend set the stage. West Virginia pledged 300 to 400 soldiers, South Carolina 200, and Ohio 150. Mississippi is adding about 200, Louisiana 135, and Tennessee 160. Each governor framed the move as support for what the White House calls an emergency crackdown on crime and illegal immigration. That rationale begins with an executive order in which the president declared a crime emergency in the district and asserted federal control over the city's police department. Governors have repeated the talking points. Tennessee's Guard, a spokesperson said, will assist with monument security, community patrols, protecting federal facilities, and traffic control. West Virginia's governor said the state is proud to stand with President Trump, while South Carolina's governor vowed to support the mission to restore law and order. A White House official added the troops will protect federal property, create a secure environment for law enforcement operations, and offer a visible presence to deter crime. But D.C. crime data undercuts the premise. District police statistics show violent crime trending downward since 2023 and now near a 30-year low. That fuels skepticism among local leaders who suspect immigration enforcement, not street crime, is the real target. If this is really about immigration, the administration should say so, Mayor Bouger argued. Unlike governors, Bouger has no authority over the D.C. Guard, leaving the city with little say in a deployment that directly affects its streets. The clash raises legal and civil liberty alarms. Critics call the federal intervention an assault on the district's limited home rule. The American Civil Liberties Union describes the troop buildup as dangerous political theater, and constitutional scholars point to the Posse Comitata Act, which generally bars the military from civilian law enforcement roles. The city has already gone to court to block a separate attempt by the administration to replace its police chief with a federal appointee. On the ground, Guard members have been assisting police with crowd control and patrolling landmarks such as the National Mall and Union Station. Officials insist they will not be making arrests, yet conflicting statements about whether they will carry weapons have added to public unease. The Pentagon first said troops would be unarmed. The D.C. Guard later said they may be armed consistent with their mission and training. Residents have noticed. The sight of camouflage uniforms and military vehicles has sparked small but vocal protests, with chants of "No Fascist Takeover of D.C." echoing through downtown streets. Bouger has also raised alarms about unidentified masked federal agents operating in the city, warning that anonymity undermines accountability. In less than 2 weeks, then, Washington has shifted from a city policing itself to one hosting soldiers from half a dozen states, a transformation driven by a presidential order that many locals say answers a question nobody asked. Supporters see a decisive response to crime and illegal immigration. Opponents see federal overreach and political grandstanding. The dispute boils down to a familiar but rarely so visible tension. How much authority should the federal government wield over the nation's capital, and at what cost to the people who live there?
For now, guard convoys rumble past the monuments as lawyers argue in courtrooms and city leaders scramble for leverage. Whatever the stated mission, the real battle may be over who controls Washington, its streets, its police force, and its narrative.
Denver is tightening its belt, cutting jobs, and warning of deeper deficits ahead. Yet the city council is headed to the mountains on a $26,000 getaway. The contrast has many residents asking, is this the right moment for a retreat? First, the fiscal backdrop. City Hall is staring at a $50 million hole in this year's budget and a projected $200 million shortfall in 2026. The biggest culprit is sluggish revenue growth. Sales and use tax collections have flattened after a decade of steady gains. With personnel costs eating up nearly 70% of the general fund, Mayor Mike Johnston's team chose the bluntest tool available: layoffs. For the first time since 2011, Denver is cutting staff. 171 employees, about 1.6% of the workforce, will lose their jobs. Another 665 vacant positions will be erased, bringing the total elimination to 928 slots. City officials say those moves save roughly $100 million, trimming the 2026 deficit by half while shielding services like trash pickup and police patrols. The layoffs come with severance, but also strings. Departing workers receive 30 days of paid administrative leave, a lump sum worth 2 to 8 weeks of pay, and 60 days of health coverage. To collect, they must sign a waiver giving up the right to sue the city. Labor unions that once backed Johnston say that clause feels like a punch in the gut and are weighing legal options. Against that somber scene, the council's upcoming 2-night retreat in Park County feels jarringly upbeat. 10 of 13 council members plus 3 staffers will attend what leaders call a focused all-day work session on team building and professional development. Taxpayers foot the entire $26,000 bill: $16,000 for the lodge, meals, and rooms, $7,600 for a professional facilitator, and $2,600 for transportation. Critics argue the optics couldn't be worse. While neighbors are cleaning out their desks, elected officials are packing for the mountains. Council President Amanda Sandoval, who pushed for the event, says the contract was signed on May 8th, 2 weeks before the mayor revealed the full extent of the budget crisis. She tried to cancel, but couldn't secure a refund. Sandoval stresses the retreat site is ADA-friendly and insists that sharpening collaboration now will help the council steer Denver through tough times. Still, for many residents, the timing overshadows the intent. The $26,000 price tag amounts to a fraction of the city's deficit, yet symbolism matters. Every public dollar spent on comforts for officials can look like one less for essential services or severance checks when wallets are thin. The episode underscores a broader tension. City leaders frame layoffs and retreats alike as investments in long-term stability, fewer salaries to pay, and hopefully a more cohesive council to navigate hard choices ahead. Laid-off workers see a different ledger: jobs lost, legal rights curtailed, and a mountain lodge that feels out of touch. Where does it leave Denver? In the immediate term, 171 people are searching for work. The city budget is still millions short, and council members will soon gather in a rustic conference room to talk strategy. Whether that meeting ultimately helps the city steer out of its fiscal storm or simply deepens public frustration may depend less on what's discussed in Park County than on what happens once everyone comes back down the hill.